Year into our marriage, my wife still wouldn't let me see her phone changed her password twice. When I finally asked why, she said, "Real men don't need passwords." Her dad told me, "You're lucky she even picked you." That night while she slept, I checked her phone. What I found involved my brother and blew my entire family apart. I didn't wake her, just packed a bag and left the wedding album on the kitchen table. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I never thought I'd be that guy posting relationship drama on Reddit, but here I am typing this out at 2 a.m. in my new apartment, staring at divorce papers and wondering how my life took such a wild turn. Throwaway account because some friends browse Reddit and I'm not ready for them to connect these dots yet. I, 44 male, met my wife Kelly, 36 female, at my friend's wedding 2 years back. She was stunning in a blue dress that matched her eyes, laughing at something my aunt said when I first noticed her across the room. Not gonna lie, I thought she was way out of my league. She was the type that lit up the room. Funny, spontaneous, and yeah, hot as hell. We clicked right away despite the age gap. Not that 8 years is huge, but enough that we grew up with different habits when it comes to technology and pop culture references. Kelly was actually super chill when we first started dating. Nothing weird or suspicious about her at all. She used her phone normally, sometimes left it on the table during dinner, would pass it to me to show photos or funny texts from her friends. Just regular, normal behavior. I never gave it a second thought because, honestly, who cares? We were happy, clicking on all levels, and having the time of our lives. Our first date was at this little Thai place downtown. She told me she was a pediatric physical therapist, loved her job working with kids with developmental issues, and had just bought her first house. I told her I was a commercial airline pilot, which usually gets one of two reactions from women. Either they think it's super impressive, or they immediately start worrying about the schedule. Kelly just nodded and asked thoughtful questions about how I handled the constantly changing time zones, and if I ever got scared during bad weather. No drama, no weird hero worship, just genuine interest. It was refreshing. We dated for a year before getting married last summer. The wedding was perfect. My deadbeat brother, I'll call him Nate, showed up in a rumpled suit he probably borrowed, looking like he just rolled out of bed. Classic Nate, always broke, always between jobs, always with some get-rich-quick scheme that fizzles out. Parents still baby him even though he's 41 and has accomplished exactly nothing in life. He spent most of the reception hitting on one of Kelly's bridesmaids and trying to convince my cousin to invest in some crypto thing he swore was the next Bitcoin. But whatever, it was my day, and I was too happy to care. The first few months of marriage were straight up awesome. I'm away on flights a few days at a time, but when I'm home, we'd make the most of it. We'd cook together, binge shows, go hiking on the weekends. Kelly works with kids all day, and she's amazing at it. Super patient, genuinely caring. We talked about starting our own family soon. We'd even started converting the spare bedroom into a potential nursery, picking out paint colors, and looking at cribs online. Everything was normal until about 6 months into our marriage. That's when my brother Nate called me out of the blue, crying about how his wife Lisa was done with his shit and wanted to separate. Not surprising considering he hasn't held a job longer than 3 months in the past 5 years and spends most of his time playing video games and day trading, aka losing money. According to him, Lisa was being totally unreasonable for expecting him to contribute to their household expenses, or, be an actual functioning adult. She just doesn't get my vision, bro, he whined into the phone. I'm right on the edge of something huge with this new investment strategy. She's walking away right before it all pays off. Sure, Nate. Just like the food truck idea, the drop shipping business, the podcast about conspiracy theories, and the workout app for gamers, all billion-dollar ideas that somehow never materialized into actual income. I let him crash at our place for a week while he figured things out. Kelly was surprisingly cool about it, even though Nate is basically a giant toddler who leaves dirty dishes everywhere and doesn't know how to use a dishwasher. She even spent time talking with him, helping him process his emotions or whatever. I was grateful she was being so supportive of my family drama. Nate would sit at our kitchen table for hours, telling Kelly all about how misunderstood he was and how Lisa just didn't believe in him. I caught snippets of these conversations when I was home between flights. Kelly seemed genuinely sympathetic, bringing him tea and listening patiently. At the time, I thought it was sweet. She was being nicer to him than I would have been. I've heard all of Nate's sob stories a million times before. The week stretched into 10 days. But eventually, Nate announced he'd found a buddy's couch to crash on. He left with a tearful goodbye to Kelly, giving her an awkwardly long hug while thanking her for seeing the real me. I rolled my eyes behind his back. Typical Nate, always the drama queen. But looking back, that's when things started to change. About a month after Nate left, I noticed Kelly acting different with her phone. Nothing major at first, just little things that seemed odd but not alarming. She started keeping it face down on tables, taking it with her to the bathroom, changing her password from the simple pattern she'd used forever to something more complex. I didn't think much of it initially. We all go through phases with our tech habits, right? Maybe she read an article about privacy or had a work thing with confidential patient info. There could be a million innocent explanations. Then I started noticing she'd get texts late at night and would turn away slightly to reply. If I walked into the room while she was on her phone, she'd quickly lock the screen. Again, not something I dwelled on. I've never been the jealous type, never felt the need to check up on who she's talking to. I trusted her completely. One night, I came home early from a short-haul flight. Weather issues canceled my last leg, so I grabbed an Uber home instead of staying at the airport hotel. It was around 11 p.m., and I found Kelly sitting on the couch in the dark, the blue light from her phone illuminating her face. She jumped when I opened the door, quickly locking her screen. "You scared me," she said, laughing nervously. "Wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "Flight got canceled," I explained, dropping my bag. "Who were you texting so late?" "Just Jen from work," she said, a bit too quickly. "Scheduling stuff for a patient tomorrow." I nodded, not thinking much of it at the time, but later I realized, why would she be scheduling patient stuff at 11 p.m.? And why did she look so startled when I walked in? The first real red flag came when I asked for the login info to our joint bank account that she had set up when we got married. We agreed to keep separate accounts for our personal spending, but created a joint one for household expenses, into which we both deposited a set amount monthly. "Why do you need it?" she asked, immediately defensive. I explained I wanted to check our balance before booking flights to visit my parents for their anniversary. Simple request, right? She made me wait while she looked it up herself, then just told me the number. Never gave me the actual login. A month later, we needed to access our shared cloud storage for some tax docs. She insisted on doing it herself, kept the screen tilted away from me, and typed in the password faster than I could read it. "Mind just telling me what the login is in case I need to get in there later?" I asked. "There's sensitive stuff on there," she said vaguely. "Work files, patient info. You know I work with kids." "Kelly, it's our shared folder. The one with tax stuff. I'm not asking for your work laptop password." She shrugged. "Just let me take care of it. It's easier that way." And just like that, another access point I was supposedly allowed to use was suddenly locked behind her Trust Me wall. Around this time, Nate was calling me regularly with updates on his separation from Lisa. Apparently, she was being vindictive by expecting him to pay his share of their credit card debt. He'd also been fired from his latest part-time gig at a warehouse because he kept showing up late. Classic Nate problems. What was weird, though, was that he kept asking about Kelly. How was she doing? Was she working a lot? Did she mention him at all? I thought maybe he was just grateful for her kindness during his stay, but there was something off about his interest. I started to wonder if something was up, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe Kelly was just organizing a surprise for me. Maybe she was dealing with something personal she wasn't ready to share. Maybe Nate was just being his usual weird self. I'm an analytical guy by nature. I fly planes for a living. I'm trained to notice patterns and anomalies without overreacting. So I started paying closer attention, making mental notes of these incidents. Then Nate got in a car accident. At least, that's what he told me over the phone, sounding pained and dramatic. Nothing fatal, but bad enough to land him in the hospital. No insurance, of course. Because why would Nate ever do the responsible thing? When I rushed over to County General, I realized I'd left my phone at home in my hurry. I asked to borrow Kelly's just to call my sister for an update, since she was supposedly already at the hospital in a different wing. "No," Kelly said, her hand literally covering her device. When I explained it was important, she reluctantly handed it over, but only after quickly closing several apps and warning me not to look at anything else. I made the call, confused by her reaction, but focused on the Nate situation. When I got to the hospital, though, something seemed off. Nate was in a regular exam room, not an emergency or trauma room. He had a bandage on his arm, but otherwise looked fine. The nurse I spoke to referred to him coming in for treatment, not being brought in after an accident. When I asked Nate what happened, he gave a vague story about being sideswiped on his bicycle, but the details kept shifting. First it was a car turning right, then it was someone backing out of a driveway. And when my sister finally showed up, She seemed confused about the urgency. When you called, I thought he was dying or something, she whispered to me in the hallway. This just looks like a regular doctor visit. That night, after getting Nate situated at his buddy's place, he wasn't even admitted to the hospital overnight. I finally asked Kelly directly, "Why wouldn't you let me see your phone earlier? And why won't you ever share any passwords with me?" She didn't even look up from her screen. "I believe in privacy and relationships," she said flatly. "Even from your husband? Even for shared accounts?" She sighed dramatically. "God, Alex, real men don't need passwords. Real men trust their wives without invading their privacy. Stop being paranoid." Something about how she said it felt off. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd used this line before to shut down conversations. And the way she's so obsessed with her phone privacy started messing with my head. Because why would you be that cautious about your phone unless you're trying to hide something? That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept replaying in my head. Real men don't need passwords. I realized something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Not just the phone, but the secrecy around our accounts. The weird vibe between her and Nate. The possibly fake accident. Individual pieces that didn't quite form a clear picture yet. After a few days of thinking it through, I decided I needed more information before jumping to conclusions. I didn't want to accuse my wife of anything without evidence. Our state is a no-fault divorce state, meaning evidence of affairs wouldn't significantly impact proceedings. But the fact that I didn't have access to our joint financial accounts was concerning from a practical standpoint. Instead of confronting Kelly directly or doing something sketchy like trying to hack her phone, I took the legal route. I contacted our bank directly as a joint account holder, which was my legal right, and requested all statements for the past year. What I found was disturbing. About $2,000 was being transferred monthly from our joint account to an unknown account for the past 4 months. The transfers had started right around the time Nate's marriage fell apart and shortly after he stayed with us. That was a serious amount of money. We each put $3,000 into the joint account monthly for bills, mortgage, groceries, and savings for our future family plans. Kelly was silently draining almost a third of that each month to where exactly? I did a little more digging. The account number looked familiar, so I checked some old emails where I'd sent Nate money a couple times when he was especially desperate. Bingo. The money was going straight to my brother. At this point, I needed to see what was happening with my own eyes. I told Kelly I had a 3-day flight assignment, but actually called in a favor from another pilot to cover for me. Instead of leaving town, I borrowed my buddy's car, so Kelly wouldn't recognize mine, and started watching from a distance. Over the next few days, I saw more than I was ready for. Kelly wasn't sneaking off to see some random guy. She was meeting up with Nate. Yeah, my brother. The same one who was supposedly crashing at a buddy's place while getting his life together. I spotted them at a coffee shop, then again at this little park near her clinic, and once just standing around by her work like it was no big deal. One time, I saw her hand him an envelope. Looked thick enough to be cash. And it wasn't a one-time thing. They were clearly seeing each other on a regular basis, right around the time his marriage went sideways and he'd been staying with us. At the coffee shop, I sat a few tables over and zoomed in with my phone. They were bent over some papers, talking low. I'm not the emotional type, but sitting there with a lukewarm coffee in my hand, watching my wife and my brother huddled up like business partners, or something worse, had my blood boiling under the surface. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Every instinct in me was screaming to walk over there and put Nate through the table. Just once. Just to see if that smug, fake sensitive face could still run his mouth with a broken jaw. But I didn't. I sat there. I made myself sit there. Because blowing up in public would give them the drama they'd spin into some sob story. I wasn't giving them that. I remember thinking, if this is what they're comfortable doing in plain sight, what the hell are they hiding behind my back? That thought's what sent me digging even deeper. The next piece fell into place when I remembered our cloud storage account. Kelly had set it up, but as I was listed on the account, I was able to reset the password by claiming I'd forgotten it. Once inside, I found a shared folder that Kelly had probably forgotten about from when we first set it up. There were hundreds of messages between her and Nate, and they weren't just friendly. It started with supportive messages about his marital problems. Lots of, "I understand how you feel," and "Lisa doesn't appreciate you," but quickly evolved into flirty exchanges. "You're the only one who really sees me," Nate had written. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I met you first," Kelly replied. There were also photos. Not explicit, but definitely suggestive. Kelly in a bath with strategic bubbles. Kelly in lingerie I'd never seen before. Photos that were clearly meant for someone other than her husband. The timestamps showed this had begun during that week Nate stayed with us. right when his marriage was imploding and he was at his most vulnerable. But the most recent messages had taken a darker turn. Nate was literally threatening her. What would Alex think if he saw these photos? If he knew what you've been saying about him? You know I need the money. My investment is about to pay off big time, but I need capital now. Either you help me out, or Big Bro gets to see everything. Your choice, sweetheart. Classic blackmail from a desperate loser. I also discovered Nate hadn't been in an accident at all. There were messages about faking the whole thing as an excuse to create drama and get money for medical bills. The hospital visit was for a routine checkup related to his supposed high blood pressure, and he'd convinced Kelly to go along with the story. I felt sick, my own brother and my wife. It was such a cliche that I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. But then the anger set in, not just at the betrayal, but at the manipulation, the lies, the financial theft, the blackmail. Once I had everything in front of me, I called a lawyer. She laid out the game plan step by step. First, I got access to all our joint accounts, which, shocker, Kelly had tried to lock me out of. I printed out every single transfer she made to Nate's account, made copies of everything. Then I pulled exactly half of what was left into a new account with my name only, and made sure it was all documented through my lawyer, just in case things got messy. I grabbed all my important stuff, passport, IDs, documents, anything I didn't want mysteriously disappearing, and booked a furnished place across town. Clean break, quiet exit, no drama. Throughout all of this, I said nothing to Kelly or Nate. I just observed, documented, and planned. I wasn't going to let emotion drive this bus off a cliff. I was going to be strategic, methodical, and most importantly, legal in everything I did. I waited until Kelly left for her Wednesday yoga class to make my move. I packed essential clothing, personal documents. I left our wedding album on the kitchen table, open to a photo of us exchanging vows. On it, I placed my house key and a letter from my lawyer outlining that I was initiating divorce proceedings based on financial impropriety, with evidence of the diverted funds. I wrote that I would be staying elsewhere temporarily, and all further communications should go through my attorney, whose contact information was provided. I didn't mention the affair or the blackmail, just the financial aspects, which were the most legally relevant. By noon, my phone started blowing up with calls from Kelly. I didn't answer. Text messages followed. Where are you? Why did you take your things? What's going on? Call me right now. Each message more desperate than the last, but none acknowledging what she'd done. By evening, the tone changed. Please come home so we can talk. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. I can explain everything. Please don't do this to us. I maintained my silence, following the lawyer's advice to avoid any communications that could be used against me later. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not responding, not demanding answers, not venting my anger and hurt. But I knew emotional reactions would only make things worse at this point. The next day, my lawyer contacted Kelly with formal notice of divorce proceedings, citing financial misconduct and including evidence of the diverted funds. That's when Kelly's messages became frantic. How dare you spy on me? Those transfers are not what you think. You're overreacting. You had no right to invade my privacy. Then came the most telling. You'll never understand what I've been going through. Your brother gave me no choice. There it was, the admission. I broke my silence with a single text. I know everything, Kelly. Every message, every photo, every payment. Contact will now be through our respective attorneys only. Her response was immediate. It's not what you think. Nate was threatening me. He said he'd tell you I came on to him if I didn't help him financially. I was protecting our marriage. Another lie. The timestamps and message content proved she initiated everything. I didn't respond. That evening, my brother finally contacted me. We need to talk, bro. Kelly's got this all wrong. She's been obsessed with me for months. I was trying to get her to stop. I blocked his number without replying. The evidence spoke for itself. Messages don't lie. Bank transfers don't lie. Only people do. By day 3, Kelly had recruited reinforcements. My phone showed missed calls from her parents, her sister, even my own mother. I spoke only to my mother briefly, explaining the situation and offering to share some of the evidence. She cut me off mid-sentence. Your brother already told us everything, she said, her voice cold. How could you do this to Kelly? She was just trying to help Nate through a difficult time, and you're throwing away your marriage over some misunderstanding. I was speechless. Mom, did Nate show you the messages? The photos? The bank statements? He doesn't need to, my mom snapped when I offered to show her the proof. We know your brother. Nate's always been charming, good with people. Not like you. You've always been too serious. Hard to talk to. Cold. Honestly, Kelly told us the same thing. She said you were emotionally distant, always in your own head. Maybe if you'd been more present, she wouldn't have needed someone like Nate to lean on. That hit harder than I expected. Not just the words, but how casually she said them, like it had been simmering under the surface for years. Like they'd always thought I wasn't enough. Too logical, too controlled, too boring to keep a wife happy. And now they had the perfect scapegoat for everything that went wrong. The story was already written, and I was the villain, the distant, robotic husband who drove his vibrant, loving wife into the arms of his misunderstood brother. And when she tried to help family, I cruelly cut her off and ran. That afternoon, Kelly showed up at my job, right at the airport. She tried to get past the front desk like nothing was wrong. My coworker, who already knew what was going on, didn't let her through. She didn't take that well. She started yelling, putting on a whole show. Security had to escort her out while she screamed that I was throwing away our marriage over nothing and losing my mind, right there in front of half my crew. Just another day in the life of the cold, calculated husband who apparently forgot how to show love. My captain, an older guy who'd been through 2 divorces himself, put his hand on my shoulder afterward. Whatever's going on, don't let it affect your flying. But if you need time off, say the word. I appreciated that. At least at work, I was still judged on my performance, not on the lies being told about me. That night, my father called. Son, I think you need to come talk this through. Your brother says there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Did he explain where the $8,000 from my joint account with Kelly went? I asked. He said Kelly was helping him get back on his feet, my father replied, his voice defensive. That's what family does. You've always had money, always had success. Your brother has struggled. Kelly understood that. So she sent him suggestive photos as financial aid? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. My father sputtered. That's not. Nate says she misinterpreted his kindness, that she became attached to him emotionally because you're always away flying, and he had to let her down gently. And there it was. Not only had they believed Nate's lies, they were now blaming me for Kelly's behavior. I was the cruel brother who wouldn't help family in need. Dad, I have the messages. I have the bank records. I can prove what really happened. We don't need to see that, he said firmly. This is family, not a court of law. I ended the call, feeling more alone than I ever had. The people who were supposed to know me best, to have my back, had chosen to believe a convenient lie rather than an inconvenient truth. The first week after I left was a barrage of calls and texts from Kelly that I didn't answer. At some point, a large flower arrangement arrived at my workplace with a card pleading for a second chance. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home. A few days later, I heard aggressive knocking at my apartment door. When I checked the peephole, I saw Kelly's father, Richard, standing there with his son, Kelly's brother, Mike. Richard was this 60-something guy with yellowed teeth who'd always made inappropriate comments about flight attendants whenever we met, asking me for insider stories with a sleazy wink. Mike was pretty much his mini-me, same attitude, same creepy vibe. "We know you're in there," Richard shouted through the door. "Be a man and face us!" I considered not answering, but my neighbor had already poked her head out into the hallway. Great. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "Can I help you? This is how you treat my daughter, you and your broke-ass, always horny con artist brother." Richard spat, his face red. "After everything she's done for you? You just walk out and hide like a coward?" Mike stood beside him, arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. "Kelly's devastated, man. She can barely get out of bed." "I'm sorry you came all this way," I said calmly. "But all communication needs to go through our attorneys now." Richard sneered. "Attorneys? Listen to Mr. Big Shot Pilot. Too important to work through family problems like normal people?" "My brother obviously manipulated Kelly," Mike added. "She's always been too trusting. Nate took advantage of her kind nature." I shook my head. "I have time-stamped evidence showing exactly who initiated what and when. The bank transfers, the messages, the photos, it's all documented." Richard leaned in. "You cold, analytical bastards are all the same. No understanding of human emotion. My daughter made one mistake, and you're throwing her away." "One mistake?" I almost laughed. "Months of deception, thousands stolen from our joint account, explicit photos sent to my brother, and planning to fake a medical emergency? That's quite a sequence of one mistake." Mike stepped forward. "You think you're better than us? Than her? You're just—" I cut him off. "This conversation is over. Please leave before I call building security." I closed the door as Richard was mid-sentence about how they weren't finished with me. Through the door, I heard Mike mutter something about teaching me a lesson, but they eventually left. I leaned back against the door, wondering if anyone would ever be interested in the actual facts, rather than the narrative they'd created to protect Kelly. The most unexpected development came next couple of days. Nate's estranged wife, Lisa, contacted me through my lawyer. She had discovered messages from her end and wanted to share information. We met in the lawyer's office to ensure everything was properly documented. Lisa looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but there was a determination in her face that I respected immediately. She had found messages on their shared laptop. Nate had forgotten to log out of his cloud account. She'd discovered the photos Kelly had sent him, along with messages discussing me. "He's so trusting. It's almost sad," Kelly had written. "Yeah, real men don't need passwords," Nate had replied, with a laughing emoji. An inside joke between them at my expense. Lisa also had bank statements showing the deposits from Kelly, which Nate had claimed were investments in a new business venture. She was filing for divorce with evidence of his financial fraud. "I wanted you to know you're not crazy," Lisa said quietly as we finished our meeting. "Nate has always been like this, taking advantage of people, lying, manipulating. I spent years making excuses for him, believing things would get better. They never did." I thanked her for her courage in coming forward. There was a weird solidarity in our shared betrayal. After that meeting, I figured I was done trying to convince anyone of anything. Let the family believe whatever version helps them sleep at night. I had the truth, the receipts, and peace of mind. That was enough for me. But then, 2 days later, my parents called asking for a family meeting. At first, I was ready to ignore it. I'd already seen how deep their denial ran. But part of me was curious. What new spin had they come up with now? Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. Not to plead my case, just to see how far they'd go to protect the golden child and the woman who betrayed me. When I arrived at their house, Nate was there with Kelly. They sat side by side on the couch, looking somber and rehearsed. My mother had made a spread of finger foods that no one was touching. My father stood by the fireplace, trying to look authoritative. "Alex," my mother trying to be gentle as if speaking to a child, "we think you're being hasty. Family should work things out." Kelly nodded tearfully. "I made a mistake, but Nate took advantage of my vulnerability. We were both wrong, but we never meant to hurt you." Nate added, "Bro, she came to me for advice about your marriage. Things got complicated, but it was just emotional, never physical." He had the audacity to look wounded, as if he were the victim here. I placed a folder on the coffee table. Bank statements, text messages, photos, time-stamped. It shows everything from beginning to end. I looked at my parents. "Will you at least look at the evidence before you decide I'm wrong?" My father waved his hand. "We don't need to see private messages. This isn't a court. This is family." The same line he'd used on the phone. That's when I realized they'd already chosen their sides. The truth didn't matter. The evidence didn't matter. They'd decided on a story that was easier for them to live with. Poor Nate, misunderstood again. Cold Alex, overreacting again. "You're right," I said, standing up. "This isn't a court, but I am pressing charges against Nate for blackmail and financial fraud. And I am divorcing Kelly for financial misconduct and infidelity. The criminal evidence has already been submitted to the DA's office." The color drained from Nate's face. Kelly let out a small gasp. "You wouldn't," Nate whispered. "I'm your brother." "And she was my wife," I replied, heading for the door. "Funny how that didn't stop either of you." I walked out, ignoring their protests. Some bridges aren't worth saving. It's been 2 months since I walked out of my parents' house. The divorce proceedings are well underway, and the criminal charges against Nate for blackmail and fraud have been filed with substantial evidence. Kelly has switched tactics from begging to threats, from threats to bargaining. Her latest offer, delivered through her attorney, she'll testify against Nate if I agree not to share the real reason for our divorce with friends and family. She's worried about her reputation. I refused. Not out of spite, but out of principle. I won't lie to protect someone who betrayed me so completely. 2 weeks ago, my personal belongings were delivered from our house, packed by a service I'd hired to avoid any interaction with Kelly. Among them was a small box containing birthday cards I'd given her, concert tickets from our dates, the watch I'd given her as a wedding gift, her pathetic attempt at emotional manipulation. At the bottom was a handwritten letter. 10 pages of explanations, justifications, and pleas for understanding. I read it completely, as my lawyer advised, documenting all communications, then provided it to my lawyer for the case file. The letter essentially admitted to the inappropriate relationship with Nate, but attempted to frame it as him taking advantage of her during a vulnerable time. She claimed I had been emotionally distant and obsessed with my career, creating the conditions that forced her to seek comfort elsewhere. Oh, of course, totally my fault she cheated and wired my money to my dirtbag brother. Makes perfect sense. As for my family, I've cut all contact. My parents tried reaching out several times, each message more desperate than the last, as the criminal case against Nate proceeded. They eventually saw the evidence during legal discovery, the explicit photos, the threatening messages, the bank transfers. It was all laid bare. They sent a formal apology letter last week. I haven't responded. Nate's divorce has gotten ugly, with Lisa using Kelly's photos and messages as leverage. She's also pursuing criminal charges for his financial fraud. He's been evicted from his friend's couch and is apparently sleeping in his car. According to mutual friends, he's been telling anyone who'll listen that he's the victim of a vengeful brother and a crazy sister-in-law. When his car got repossessed, because of course he wasn't making payments, he ended up moving into our parents' basement. At 41, full circle to where he spent most of his adult life, mooching off mom and dad. All while Kelly's carefully constructed image has crumbled. Several friends have reached out to me, apologizing for believing her initial story. Her workplace put her on probation after the scandal broke, since they take ethical conduct seriously in pediatric care. She's lost her social standing, her marriage, and most of her friends. As for me, I've moved into a new apartment across town. I've been offered a better route with the airline, partly because my boss saw how professionally I handled the office incident with Kelly. I've reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage and started playing guitar again, a hobby I'd given up because Kelly found it annoying and pointless. I'm now in the process of buying a cabin in the mountains, something I'd always wanted but Kelly had dismissed as too isolated. For the first time in years, I'm making decisions based solely on what I want. The divorce will be finalized next month. Kelly has been ordered to return the diverted funds plus interest, and we're dividing our remaining assets according to state law. I still have moments of anger, moments of sadness about what could have been. We were talking about starting a family for God's sake, but mostly I feel relieved that I discovered the truth before we had kids. The most valuable lesson from this disaster? Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong consistently, it probably is. Real men don't need passwords? Maybe not, but real men do know when to walk away. Oh, and I became a dog dad. Adopted this goofy rescue mutt with mismatched ears. Named him Radar. Best decision ever. Dude doesn't ask for my passwords or steal my money. Also going out with this hot flight attendant from international routes. Nothing serious, just enjoying single life again. First night we hung out, she left her phone on the table when she went to the kitchen. Didn't flip it face down, didn't take it with her, nothing. Weird how something so small felt significant after the Kelly shit show. I guess the silver lining in this cluster fudge is my now bulletproof bullshit detector. Kelly and Nate did me a favor in a weird way. Some lessons cost 15 grand and a year of your life, but hey, expensive education is still education.